Hi there, welcome back to Paginated Reports 101. This is Lenore Flower with Caf2Code, and in this video I'll be walking you through how to beautify your report so it's ready for prime time. This video is going to go through how to take our report from its currently raw and unformatted state into something a little more like this. To get to our final version, we're going to take the following steps, starting with the matrix and working our way out. We'll center the column headers and subheaders, including adding bolding, centering, and backgrounds. We'll update the quarterly grouping using quarter sort so that we end up with a chronological listing of those quarters instead of, well, whatever's happening here. We'll change the data format so that quantity is a number, and average price per unit and total sales is converted to currency, and we'll adjust the row headers and format the borders. Then we'll address the quarter name parameter, which is suffering from the same non-chronological funkiness that we're seeing with the quarter name headers. We'll also address the region so that we have just one listed instead of select multiples, and we'll add a dynamic title and a page number. Finally, we'll configure the online and print views so that when people are running this report, they have a good end user experience, whether they're running the report online through the Power BI service or looking at a printout. Here is our raw version of our report. Lot to do here with the online view so it's easy to read. If we look at the print layout, we can also tell in its 15-page glory that there is a lot left to be desired here. Note, of course, that our states are showing up on some pages but not others. Similarly, the column headers aren't showing up. There's a lot of room for improvement here, so let's get started. Let's go ahead and cut our state and customer name and then paste in the row below. I'm simply using Control X and Control V here, the same way that you would if you were doing that in Excel. Then I'm going to select this first box, hold down the Shift key, and select this last box in these first two rows so that I can easily do a few quick formatting steps. I'd like to bold them, have them all set to the middle, and center them. Okay. Customer names can be quite long, so let's give them a bit of breathing room. And we'll do the same for total quantity. Average price per unit in comparison is going to be pretty small once we're done with the formatting. So we're going to let this go into a second line, and we're going to expand this out. Note that because we centered and we put it in the middle, these are all nicely adjusting as we increase and decrease the space here. Quarter name we want to emphasize, so I'm going to use this lovely light gray option. And then let's go ahead and adjust our numbers. Now we can do this here by double clicking and then choosing number and adjusting down to the decimal places. But there's some shortcuts that you can use up here on the home page as well. So if I select this one, hold down Shift and select the second, I can also just, for the currency, for example, click on that, and now they're both set to currency with a default of using a comma for the thousand separator and 2 decimals. Okay, one last step before we take a quick peek at how things are looking so far. I'm going to go ahead and select the top to the bottom, holding down Shift, and I'm going to remove all the borders so we can just see what that looks like. Already with a little bit of cleanup in the matrix, you can tell that there's a big improvement here, but I still find this pretty confusing to read. So what I'm going to do is add in some borders, 2 vertical ones, one at the beginning and one at the end of each quarter, and then a horizontal one under each state and customer name. The way we set this up is by selecting this first column at the beginning of quarter name, and then I'm just going to select left here. I've selected a light gray border that matches this quarter name. You could always choose another color. I know some people prefer black. That option is of course still there, and it is the default. And then on the right side, I'm going to select a right border. Then selecting this bottom row, which you can do very easily by clicking this first box, I'm going to select bottom, and that will give us the borders that we want. Okay, so now if we scroll, we should be able to follow that line much more easily than if we hadn't otherwise. I know we can't see the state or customer name yet, but we will get to that a little bit later in this video. Let's go ahead and address the quarter chronological issue. As you can see right here, we've got the Q1s and the Q2s together instead of having a nice Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Similarly, up here in the quarter name parameters, all the Q1s are lumped together and all the Q2s and the Q3s as well. The way that you clean that up for the column header here is we're going to go down to column groups, right click on that quarter name, go to group properties, then sorting, and we're going to use that field that you may recall that we included when we built out the initial main data set called quarter sort. This is going to do the same thing that a month sort would do if you've ever used that in Power BI Desktop to order your months so that when you have month names, you're able to have a visual like a bar chart with the months ordered in the correct chronological order, say January, February, March, instead of them starting with April and then August. Okay, that is all you really need to do to get this column group to work the way that it should. Now we need to tackle our report parameter quarter name. What we want to do here is get them in chronological order, and I think we also want to shrink down the list to just the quarters that we need, so it's a little easier for report users to be able to find the quarters that they want. We're going to start by addressing the formerly hidden data set that I've made visual. Again, you can do that by clicking the Show Hidden Data Sets. And we're going to adjust this so that the output is what we need it to be. That will feed into the parameter properties, which will allow the drop-down list to be what we want the way we want it. So when we open up this data set, I want you to keep in mind that this was automatically generated when we initially added in the parameters from the main data set. And what that means when it's automatically generated is that this query is going to be the same one that shows up in any other automatically generated data set that's designed to support your parameters. If we go up to fields, you can see that we've got 4 field names. They will always be the same. And you've got this fourth one that, unlike the first 3, is not coming from a query. It is instead a calculated field that is applying 3 spaces to any field parameter caption value at the beginning of that, so it's indented by 3 spaces, whenever the parameter level is 1. If it's 0, it's 0 spaces. 3 times 0 is 0, 3 times 1 is 3. We don't need this for this report, so we're going to delete it. I wanted to point that out first because on many occasions I've made adjustments and not been able to figure out why my report wouldn't run properly. And it was because I hadn't thought to adjust that field that is added in here to the query. You can go in here and make all these adjustments to this query. If you haven't adjusted that calculated field that auto-populates, it's still not going to run correctly. So that's why I do that first. Then here in the Query Designer, I want to show you very briefly the output that's coming from this. We've got the quarter name, which is coming out in the order that we were just seeing in the report. And then we have these additional fields that aren't really adding much value. So I'm going to go ahead and start over and build another query. Here in the Query Designer, I'm using design mode, which I think is easiest for people who are new to this, and I often find to be most convenient anyway. I'm going to pull in quarter name and quarter sort. Now suddenly we've got our quarters in chronological order, which is what we need. But recall that I wanted to further limit the amount of data that was populating to match up with what's coming into the main data set, so we don't end up with quarters that just have no value and are confusing report users. So I'm going to apply the exact same custom filter that we set up for the main data set using that date year equals year to day. So in other words, filter for the current year, or that's what those two pipes mean. I'm just going to copy paste sheerly out of laziness. Date year equals year to day minus 1. Filter for the current year and the prior year. If we click to execute, the quarters have shrunk down to just 2022 and 2023. If we came back to run this on January 1st, 2024, we would get 8 quarters again, but for 2023 and 2024, as long as 2024 was in the date table. Okay. So we've cleaned this up so the raw materials are there to feed into the report parameters, but we still need to tell the report parameter properties that they have some new raw materials to work with. And we're going to do that by right-clicking, selecting parameter properties for date quarter name, going to available values. Note here that these are showing up as blank. That's because we got rid of the old fields that they were using to replace them with better ones. The data set name didn't change, so that's still holding strong there. I'm just going to choose quarter name for both. And now we've made all the adjustments necessary to feed the right data into the quarter name parameter. Let's take a look and see how our report is working now. Okay, we now have a chronological list of quarters, and we have just 8 listed here in the quarter name parameters with a chronological order here too. Fantastic. One more step we want to take before we move on to building in the title is we're going to adjust the customer region's parameter properties to disallow multiple values. Whenever you need to make that kind of adjustment, you're going to right-click on the parameter and just go to this general section. That's all you got to do. Okay, moving on to titles. By default, the blank reports for paginated reports are going to have this click to add title. And you can put in something static here if you want. In general, I strongly prefer putting in a dynamic title. I find them more fun and I find them more useful. So I'm going to go ahead and put together a concatenated text string, which is going to be quarterly report for the and parameters custom region value and region. If we go ahead and hit OK, we're going to have this enormous title, which I'm going to shrink down just for now, and we can run it. We'll select the South region that has the most data. Okay, so we have this left justified title, which is fine, but the thing that I don't love about this default option is a lot of times I really want my printout to have the title repeat at the beginning of each page. And as you can see very clearly here, that's not happening. So let me show you how I can make that happen using the headers. I'm going to add a header. I'm going to take this expression, if I can click on it, pull it in. I'm just going to set it to go from the beginning to the end of the space here horizontally. And then I'm going to go ahead and center it. Now you can see that it repeats on every single page. That may or may not be what you need in your particular report situation, but I want you to know how to do it, so either way you have the option. Okay, unlike the header, the footer is going to show up as a default. And since we want to get that page number in here, I'm just going to go ahead and insert a text box, which is just going to be the holder for that page number. I'm going to pull the page number in, which is part of the list of built-in fields. If you haven't seen this before, it's the very first folder up here under report data. Running the report one last time, you can see the number is populating beautifully. Okay, so there's still a lot to be desired here, though. As you can see with the report layout, it's not very, it's pretty cumbersome. And if we switch from print layout to see a larger region, we run into another annoying problem, which is we've got these row headers and these column headers that we've beautifully formatted, but when we scroll down, we lose them. So let's talk about how to fix that. When it comes to making your tablix, your tabular matrix, scroll-friendly for online view, it's a two-step process. The first one's pretty straightforward if you know where to find it. When it comes to having your header visible while scrolling, both for columns and rows, it's just a matter of clicking these two boxes. But there's an additional step that a lot of people forget or don't realize they need to do in the first place, and that's adding a white background to the headers. If you don't do this, the headers will still scroll with you, but they'll show up as transparent and they'll sit on top of your data, making them pretty much impossible to read. Going back to our report, all we have to do now to make that available is right-click on Tablix Properties when we have our matrix selected, and we're going to choose Keep Header Visible while scrolling for rows and Keep Header Visible while scrolling for columns. Then, for any of our columns or rows that don't already have filler, so basically everything that isn't a quarter name, we're going to select and fill with white. And we're going to do the same thing with the state and customer name values, since we also want to see those as we scroll along. Choosing again our largest region, I can show you now that the states and customer names scroll nicely, and the same can be said for the column names at the top. So the most important final step when it comes to making sure that your report is going to print well, which really when we're talking about paginated reports is the most important part, is to get everything set up not only for things to line up nicely on the individual pages, but to repeat when you need them. In the exact same spot that we just looked at, you may have already noticed that you have this little option to repeat header rows on each page, right? The key thing here is just to check that box. But there's a bunch of other stuff that we're going to need to do as well to make sure everything's set up. Again, you can adjust this under Tablix Properties. You'll see the same thing over here under Tablix Properties, which you can see on the Properties pane when you have it enabled. You also want to ensure that your report properties are set up so that the paper size and margins is set up to align with the intended report output. In this case, we're saying that it's going to be a letter size page and that we're going to put it in landscape mode, meaning our width will be 11 inches. The additional step we're going to take here is to consume container white space, which is going to help us avoid having some of those blank pages that show up sometimes. Then on the body properties, which is separate from the report properties, we're going to set the body width to match the report properties. When it comes to the body width, we're going to use the report width less whatever margins you select. In our case, we're going to use that width of 11 inches and then have two 1-inch margins. So we're going to have a 9-inch body property. The height isn't something that you're necessarily going to manually fix in the properties section. That's something that we're going to adjust in the report pane to make sure there's no white space between the end of the tablets and the footer. That will also help us prevent that dreaded blank white page that sometimes shows up when you're building out these paginated reports. So starting with our Tablix properties, I'm going to go ahead and check both of these boxes. But I also want to show you over here, see how on the properties pane we have repeat column headers and repeat row headers? This is doing exactly the same thing. And you're going to see when I hit OK that these falses are going to change to true. a solid first start, I think. Let's proceed with getting our report properties set up. So we said we wanted landscape, which is going to give us a letter with width of 11 inches. I'm going to go ahead and leave the margins as is. You may want to adjust them, but for the most part, I'm leaving them this way for simplicity of math. Next, I'm going to click into the body. If you don't already have this property panes open, you can just click it under view and turn on this properties. You will need that for adjusting the body. If you choose body properties here instead, you're going to have a really annoying time trying to find the size because I don't think it's in here. So size, we want to adjust to, again, 11-inch width minus 2 1-inch margins, so 9 inches exactly. And we'll adjust everything over here so that our header is showing up nicely. This execution time we'll just keep in the corner. And our page number, we're going to just kind of pop in the middle directly between 4 and 5. We'll move this as close to the top as we can. And then I'm just going to scooch this footer right next to our tablets. Okay, let's take a look at the end result and see if it's presenting the report that we want to see. Okay, here we are with our quarterly report for the sales region. For the most part, things are looking good. And we've got the dreaded white page, which means that we missed something. Let's go back in and take a look at where we are. We've gone ahead and we've removed white space, so we know we're good there. We adjusted the report. We did our math. 11 inches minus 2 for each of the margins does equal 9. If we click on the body, we can see that that's 9 inches, so we're good. What we missed is adjusting for that consumed container white space. Down here, it's got a little explanation. Consumed container white space indicates whether minimum white space in containers is consumed or preserved when the contents of containers grow. If I adjust this from false to true, and I run the report, that single fix has removed 2 pages. And if we get to page 5, which was the one that caused trouble, all of a sudden, all of our pages are showing up exactly the way we expect, which means our report is done. This has been a presentation by Caf2Code, a consulting company where some of my favorite nerds and I work to help companies solve problems and build capacity in the areas of D365 FO, Power BI, and Power Platform. I hope this 101 series on paginated reports has left you feeling ready to tackle your next paginated report challenge. But if you find that you could use some extra support in any of these areas, we'd be glad to help. Thanks for watching.